Hello and good weekend. It's Adil Fazal here, market analyst on behalf of CFDs.com, a leading spread betting and CFD brokerage. Certainly be sure to visit their website and check out the other products and services that they offer. Also the educational website too, which is www.cfds.education, where I post my charts, latest charts, updated, the technical analysis update on several indices, forex as well, so forex pairs, and the overall market going forward. Okay, a good weekend to all, and let's all pray for Greece. The situation in Greece certainly gets resolved. What is my take, or should I say, what is the market's take on where it wants to go? Let's find out. Okay, let's find out. Let's see exactly where this market is currently structured or currently positioned, and let's find out whether or not this market certainly will start to propel higher or not. Okay, so the fundamental perspective, basically, I think it all revolves around the situation regarding the yes or no vote over the weekend. My personal perspective, reading between the lines, and the way in which the market is obviously reading it as well, is basically the yes vote should prevail, and that obviously should lead to the resignation of these two dimwits. From my perspective, I think they're absolute idiots. Although I do understand and I do respect Greece's situation, given the fact that it doesn't want to embrace austerity, and it thinks austerity is obviously failing. Having said that, I personally still think that there still needs to be some compromise from the Greek situation. They need to realise that they're not the A side, they're the B side. So therefore, whenever you're the B side, you have to accept certain conditions and restrictions, regardless of the situation at hand. If they are blaming the actual lack of growth on European austerity, then I think that's somewhat unfounded, given the fact that they've been unable to implement reforms, chase those individuals that aren't paying tax, or either tax avoiders, tax dodgers, and it certainly seems to be a corrupt system. So on one hand, you've got a lack of transparency, a lack of action on behalf of the Greek side, a lot of complacency there, and the attitude and very arrogant, very cocky type of perspective from a Greek situation, because when you are obviously under duress and you have financial constraints, then you really do need to be very frugal, okay, and be very prudent. And I've not seen both of those two terms obviously reminiscent with the likes of Mr. Tsipras and Mr. Varoufakis. They've been very aggressive in there and are blaming everyone except themselves. So whenever you blame others except yourself, then that generally is not a good sign, okay? Blaming the EU, blaming the IMF, it's a blame game, okay? The fact that you haven't, your own basically accounts are not in order, I think that needs to be addressed first. And if there are certain areas, such as if you want to cut military spending, for example, you want to cut the pensions or increase the age of the actual individuals that are obviously going to retire, etc. Those things that need to be done for the sake of the nation. So even if it is the elder generation, they need to do it for the next generation. So they need to make sacrifices. If you love your nation, and you respect that, then you don't have to make those sacrifices for the sake of the nation and the sake of your citizens, rather than being selfish and thinking about one social group only. Again, that's only temporary. The deal that was offered by Juncture, I've read through that, and I do think that was very reasonable, okay? And again, that didn't set everything in stone. They were flexible. So if you were going to embrace austerity and accept the deal for the next 5 or 10 years, yes, there is going to be short-term pain, but there's long-term gain. And then once you're in a more healthy position in terms of your debt, then you can renegotiate a better deal, just like a mortgage. I remember when I first took out my mortgage. I mean, I was at university at the time, and it was ridiculous. I was paying almost £1,100 a month. But as time went on, within the next 3 to 4 years, the payments dropped quite significantly. But it allowed me to get onto the housing ladder, and it was short-term pain for long-term gain. Okay, and now it's been over 10 years now, and I've only got 10, 12 years left of a mortgage. So it's it's looking at the long-term nature. If you are short-term or have short-sightedness, and you only look at the temporary benefit or the temporary loss, then from my perspective you're very selfish, okay? And you're not very wise either, okay, from my understanding. So yes, there are sacrifices that the Greek individuals have to make, but that is for the long-term gain as opposed to the short-term pain. So if you think of the short-term, again, you're very selfish, because if you want to build your nation and make your nation more financially viable going forward, then sacrifices and compromises need to be made, okay? Especially when you're the B side, such as Greece. I mean, what realistically does Greece have to offer the world, other than tourism? I mean, there's nothing much you can really think in terms of its exports. It's not like Australia or New Zealand, where it's, you know, endowed, or, you know, by God with natural resources or minerals. Or it's not Saudi Arabia or Norway, where you've got immense amount of oil, etc. So if anything, it's services and obviously tourism. That's the only thing I can think of from a Greek situation. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but again, you're the B side. So when you're the B side, it's just like any boxing fight. When you had Manny Pacquiao versus Mayweather, Mayweather was the A side, so therefore he could negotiate his ring entrance, the gloves, he could dictate everything, and the B side just has to accept. So Mr. Pacquiao only got 40%, if that, okay, and he got 60%. So it's about the A side and B side here. And when you are the B side, and to be honest with you, not exactly, I'd say Greece was even the C side in this equation, because they've lost all credibility. I mean, this Mr. Varoufakis now, I mean, the latest, Varoufakis accuses Greek creditors of terrorism. I mean, language like that is just obnoxious, and signs of an imbecile from my perspective, and a lack of experience as well. This chap here, he was a blogger, now he's become a finance minister. I mean, come on, it's just ridiculous. I mean, social media gone wrong, basically. So, again, interesting scenario now. Also, with regards to the Greek situation, there is the geopolitical and socio-economic aspect as well. So, politics mainly because the Greeks obviously have half of control of Cyprus, the Turkish situation, the Ukrainian situation, and Russian situation as well, okay, because there is a lot of Russian expats, etc., in Cyprus and also in Greece as well. So therefore there is a geopolitical game that's being played. So it's the playground was Ukraine. The playground became Cyprus at one time, okay, and also now the playground certainly seems to be Greece. So there is a connection there in terms of Russia versus the US and the Cold War Part 2. So again, that's certainly in the aspect of it as well. So therefore they can't allow Greece to leave, okay. So it's very, very important, and it's very similar to the Scottish vote here in the UK, where there was a lot of rhetoric and a lot of talk about the Scots obviously becoming independent and so on and so forth, and when it came down to the vote, obviously that didn't occur. So the same situation is occurring here from my understanding. It's all noise from a trading perspective, and therefore noise generally gets evaporated closer to the actual occasion, and that's exactly what I expect to happen as well. The only scenario here is that the Greeks obviously have lost a lot of credibility, but having said that, if this individual who claims he'll resign, which you can tell from the rhetoric from the German side, and you can tell from the rhetoric from the Greek side as well, I think the Greeks have, or the Greek dimwits such as Varoufakis and Mr. Tsipras, have obviously accepted defeat because they've already talked about resignation, and there's a lot of infighting and lack of unity now within their own party as well. And I think they've, especially when they get the yes vote to remain in Europe, they'll have lost all credibility, and that obviously leaves the market, or leaves the Germans open to working with somebody who's more amicable and obviously who is more German friendly or more EU friendly, and that will certainly obviously eradicate the hard line from the Greeks, and there should be a compromise, and the markets will stabilize and therefore move higher. That's my understanding, okay. So there's the economic aspect of it as well, because of the fact that we all should say socio-political aspect, socio-economic aspect, because of the investment that's gone into Greece and the investment that's gone into the Eurozone, and the fact that they want to keep the EU project obviously viable and functioning, okay, and there certainly can't be a lack of credibility there. So the EU or the ECB has already talked about using additional tools, therefore that's bullish, and also the yes vote is probably going to be my understanding anyway, reading between the lines and the way in which the IMF now then started to talk about a debt haircut, and how the US Mr. Jack Lew, Treasury Secretary, basically came in and intervened as well and started talking about haircuts. There was some article being passed around as well from the German side that they will potentially accept haircuts. Now obviously the Greeks, they started to talk about a 30% haircut, knowing that haircuts were being talked about. I do think that the Germans will eventually cascade and accept a potential 10 or 15% haircut, and that should basically get the deal done, from my understanding. That's how I'm interpreting it. Okay, so now let's have a look at the actual technicals now. One more factor as well. The actual Chinese have now stepped in, and they are starting to potentially print money and buy stocks, in the sense that they're the biggest hedge funds, are starting to invest into equity. So China market rescue meeting yesterday leaked by state media, etc., etc. Chinese QE. China cuts IPOs, enlists brokers in all-out bid to end market rout. If you go to my website, you'll see that there's the Reuters article. Being intensified efforts that weekend to pull China's stock market out of a nosedive that is threatening the world's second largest economy, etc., etc., with top brokerages pledging to buy massive amounts of shares, and a report that government has set up a market stabilization fund. Beijing has suspended new share offers, etc., etc. Reported suspension of the IPOs came a few hours after extraordinary meetings, which collectively pledged to invest at least 19 billion of their own money into stocks. If that's not QE, folks, what is? So basically that's the buy side now being king, and that should send the Asian markets higher, which in turn will stabilize any potential fallout from Greece. When you have $19 billion being invested on one side, now there's even talk of almost trillions being invested into the Chinese stock market. So that alone would negate any concerns from Greece, from my understanding. Add in the fact that you've got the IMF, or the ECB, or the actual, should I say, the IMF talking about potential haircut now as well. So there's a deal going to. That generally means that there's going to be a deal happening very soon. Also, given the fact that you've got the ECB stating that they'll use additional tools necessary. Again, that's more QE. So the market is stabilized to a large extent. Everything else has become noise. Everything else just becomes noise. Now I'll give you I'll show you a chart of the Shanghai, for example. You have a H&S formation and a target has been hit. So it's no surprise that when the H&S target is complete and the short and the long squeeze is over and the shorts want to scamper now and close their positions on the potential drop, that you all of a sudden get a talk, or all of a sudden you get mention or talk of a potential, obviously a 19 billion or up to a trillion purchase of equities. So that's the situation we find ourselves in. So certainly we're expecting a move higher in the UK markets and European markets in general, and also US markets as well. Now let's have a look at the technical side of the equation, now that I've explained the fundamentals. Also, one more factor as well in terms of fundamentals, the actual economic data that came out on Friday was pretty impressive in terms of the UK and Europe as well. We had market services PMI coming at 58.5 versus 57.4, and the rest of the economic data, more or less from Europe, came in line, if not beat. So overall, net it's a positive, and that obviously bodes well. Now let's have a look at the FTSE from a technical perspective. The first chart that I want to show you is the FTSE Volatility Index, and what do you realise straight away? The Volatility Index is obviously into resistance. So whenever the Volatility Index is into resistance, that means that the equity market is into support, and therefore supports the FTSE 100 moving higher. Let's go to the FTSE 100 chart now. Let's go to a weekly first of all. On a weekly chart, clearly shows you that there's massive amounts of support, humongous levels of support here at this zone. Certainly looking for support on the FTSE, and that obviously has held as well with a potential bottoming tail. So even with this Grexit concern and referendum concern, the FTSE still managed to put in a bottoming tail on the weekly chart, and that, from my perspective, certainly is a bullish sign. Right, daily chart of the FTSE 100. Again, we are into this falling or downward sloping contracting wedge pattern. We obviously bounced off this support level around the 6525, and even going into a Friday, we didn't capitulate. We negated this red candle on the 30th of June. The subsequent two candles have shown good buying power and looking for a potential move higher. So don't be surprised if you see a thrust higher to 6740, 6750. on the FTSE 100. Okay, now let's have a look at the 60-minute chart on the FTSE 100, and abracadabra, you have a scenario here where we're expecting a potential thrust or a move higher. Okay, so this is probably a candle that we can use here as well, a potential trend line. But the main thing here is you have a downward sloping expanding wedge. That generally means a bullish sign. And then you have an inverted head and shoulders formation with a target of 6820. Okay, so the scenario here certainly remains bullish given the fact that you put in a higher low. Okay, the 10-minute chart of the FTSE 100. Okay, so the main obviously our bullish argument here is that we put in a lower low. After that we failed to put in a lower low, so everything is consolidating. We have a potential inverted head and shoulders on the 10-minute as well, looking for a potential break higher up to 6650, obviously 6700 should I say, and then obviously you've got 6730. So these are all the levels that we're potentially going to watch. Okay, that's the scenario that we find ourselves in, and again no lower lows, and we're looking for a potential higher high. Okay, so given the fact that this is a higher low. Now cross verifying that with the FTSE 250, we again put in a potential bottoming tail on the weekly chart on the FTSE 250. The daily chart, again we've bounced. There is an H&S formation there, so again we need to be made aware of that. But again, given the fact that that can be a subjective pattern, for my argument, we've held this pivot support, we've bounced, we've inside bar on this green candle and looking for a potential thrust higher. Now the FTSE all share, again we have obviously dipped below the 200 MA, so that again does remain a concern from a technical perspective, but previous resistance certainly equals support here, so we are into a potential support zone for the actual FTSE all share index as well. I think the most important aspect in terms of the FTSE 100 is the actual volatility index, and the FTSE itself on the 60-minute is showing you an inverted head and shoulders formation. Volatility index is obviously into resistance, and the daily chart is certainly showing some support. Again, that obviously if the yes vote were to occur, the market obviously would be spiking higher. If the no vote occurs, then obviously we continue to make lower lows and lower highs and expect the FTSE 100 to retest the 6520 level. The 60-minute chart, the inverted head and shoulders formation will break down, and again we'd go back down and test the 6520, if not potentially make a new low. So certainly looking at both sides of the equation here, but from my understanding and my reading of the markets thus far, I do expect the upside scenario, and that's what I'd be looking for. Again, I'll do another video elaborating on the European indices, and I'll explain the actual current bias, or where I think the market will be going from that perspective. Okay folks, I think that's a wrap with regards to the FTSE. Certainly again, once again, certainly to be sure to visit cfds.com, and certainly there is a bonus offer there for you as well, 25% up to 25% on all new trading accounts and existing accounts as well. Be sure to visit the educational web page as well, www.cfds.education, where I post live charts, analysis and videos as well. Okay, happy weekend, and stay nimble and get ready for the Greek referendum or the exit polls as well. Okay folks, goodbye.